Darrell Henderson has a chance to be a fantasy football league winner in 2021. With no Cam Akers, no Malcolm Brown, and no real competition on the depth chart to speak of, this guy could get a lion's share of the workload in a really good Rams offense. But the question is he good enough to take that opportunity and turn it into a big payoff for your fantasy squad? I've watched every single play from this guy from 2020, and I think his talent is flying way under the radar with fantasy managers. Where he's being taken in drafts right now, I think Henderson is one of the biggest upside plays in 2021 fantasy. Hey guys, this is my first fantasy football analysis video, and it's also the first video in a series I'm going to be doing on some mid-round running backs whose ADPs are between the 3rd round and the 6th round. I thought it would be important to highlight a few of these players going in so-called dead zone, where there's just so much variability in terms of where they might finish in this season. So I'm hoping to give you some good intel and some good game film to take a look at to help you guys make a good decision. So one thing that really stands out to me when I watch Henderson's tape is that he's a really tough runner, especially considering his size. He's only 5'8", but he's 210 pounds, so he's thick, but not in an Eddie Lacy way, more like an Austin Eckler way. That's a trait of his that was borne out in his college stats. For example, in his final college season in 2018, he had a ridiculous 6.16 yards per carry after contact, and in the 5 years before that, no running back in college football had even hit 5. Most of them were like 4.9 at the max, and that included guys like Dalvin Cook, Kareem Hunt, Bryce Love, dudes that are just really hard to bring down on first contact, and he was by far the best of all of them. Now, he's not the type to hit the truck stick and just run through people, but he very rarely gets hit backwards or gets stopped dead on first contact. He consistently falls forward for extra yards. I don't know why, but for some reason, whenever I saw Henderson's headshot in all the fantasy platforms, I always just assumed he was a slow guy. I can't really explain why, but he just never struck me as like a speedster. You know, when you see guys like John Ross or Matt Breida or whatever, they just look fast, and for some reason, this dude just did not look fast. I thought he was slow until I popped on his game film. I was like, whoa, this dude is insanely fast. Now, that's not to say he has that elite top-end speed like a Tyreek Hill, but his acceleration is really impressive. When there is a hole there for him to hit, he basically teleports right into the second level of defense, and then it's up to the defensive backs to try to bring him down. And he's really shifty when he's at his top speed. He doesn't make these giant jump cuts in the same way that Cam Akers does, where he can just break guys' ankles. But what he does is he's very good at veering while staying at his top speed. He has pretty good vision, and he can use that veering ability to set up his blocks and get to angles on the outside runs. And he has enough wiggle to make defenders completely whiff sometimes, but he doesn't usually do it in the same way that Cam Akers would do it, for example, with those violent cuts where he pretty much has that incredible stopping and starting ability. With Henderson, it's more of a slight change of direction that he does really quickly. I also noticed that he was really good at finding cutback lanes, but when he did that, he did more gradual cutbacks, not necessarily big jump cutbacks. he has really good hands. I didn't see a single drop in the entirety of his 2020 game film, and he even came down with some passes that were just straight up bad, and he almost caught a couple of really horrible passes too. Now, one thing that needs to be brought up is that Jared Goff was not very good when targeting his running backs in 2020. The quarterback switch from Goff to Stafford is going to be really good for Henderson, and I'll get into that more later. But plain and simple, Jared Goff just missed Henderson a ton. He missed him on wide open touchdowns, and he consistently threw the ball behind him instead of leading him upfield. And before anybody says, hey, Henderson's too short, that's why he was getting overthrown, some of these throws, I don't even know if Megatron will come down with them. So, what does this all mean for 2021? Well, basically, the Rams' backfield was kind of up for grabs all year, and the main factor that was deciding it was simply injuries to one guy giving a bunch of opportunities to the other guy. Literally from the very start of the season to the very end of it. So in 2020, with Gurley gone, the Rams drafted Cam Akers with the second pick, late in the second round, I believe. And they came into the year talking about wanting to use a committee approach at the running back, which I thought was smart for that team. They wanted to make a deep playoff push with that defense and with a questionable quarterback in Jared Goff. It made sense to split up the workload and try to keep all the running backs healthy for a deep playoff push. Unfortunately, that plan kind of went out the window right away when Henderson picked up a hamstring injury in preseason, and Akers went down in week 2 with a pretty nasty rib cartilage injury, which kept him out a few weeks. When Akers went down in week 2, Henderson stepped up and put up, I believe, 120 total yards and also a score on the ground. And then going into the next week against the Bills as the starter, with Akers out again, he put up another 120 total yards and another score on the ground. So Sean McVay did the reasonable thing the next week and benched Henderson and gave Malcolm Brown his highest snap count of the year. Which I guess plays into the whole let's split up the workload and keep everyone healthy, but it is a little bit frustrating for Henderson. So after that, Akers came back in week 5 for just a handful of carries, but he still wasn't healthy. And even though he was active the next 2 games, he didn't get any touches in those games because he was clearly still battling the rib injury. Henderson did fine in those weeks. He went for 6 yards per carry and then 4 yards per carry. But then in week 8 against Miami, he had to leave the game with a quad injury. And that opened the door for Cam Akers to get his first touches since his injury. So now the Rams had 2 young running backs kind of going back and forth, playing through injury, trying to claim the backfield. And Malcolm Brown was kind of just there, taking a bunch of snaps and pass protection. Both guys were okay against the Seahawks. And both of them really struggled against Tampa Bay's great defense. But in week 12, there was a turning point where Henderson struggled against the 49ers and Akers ripped off some big runs in that game, and it was pretty much over from that point. Akers came into the next week and got 21 carries and then 29 the following week. It really seemed like he was going to take over the backfield in a big way, but unfortunately he had an ankle injury that's kept him out of week 16, where Henderson filled in pretty well against the Seahawks. But the injury gods are cruel, and while Henderson was making a break for the end zone, Jamal Adams made this diving tackle where he barely got him by the ankle, and he actually trapped the ankle in a really bad angle, and I believe it caused a high ankle sprain. So for the second time in 2 years, Henderson was put on the injury reserve in week 16. Another major factor is the quarterback switch from Jared Goff to Matthew Stafford. Now, I think that Matthew Stafford is going to run the offense better, but specifically Matthew Stafford targets his running backs a lot, and way more than Jared Goff ever did. So coming into the 2019 season, Matthew Stafford held the 4th highest percentage of his throws to his running backs at 23%. So almost a whole quarter of all his pass attempts were going to his running backs. So that was coming into 2019. During 2019 and during 2020, Stafford threw over 100 targets each year to his running backs, which was middle of the pack for the league. On the other hand, Jared Goff hardly ever threw any targets to his running backs. In fact, in 2019, he threw the fewest in the entire league. And then in 2020, he threw the 3rd fewest, only throwing more than the Ravens and the Titans, both of whom are obviously very run-heavy teams. Henderson's competition on the depth chart consists of 3 guys, all of whom were 7th-round picks in the past 2 years, and they all 3 combined have a total of 0 offensive snaps in the NFL. Xavier Jones was a rookie last season with the Rams, and he returned 1 kick all year. Jake Funk is an incoming rookie, and Raymond Calais was a 7th-round pick, not even by the Rams, it was by Tampa Bay, and then they waived him, and he was inactive for all but 4 games last year for the Rams, where he just returned a handful of kicks. Malcolm Brown was the main pass protecting back on the team, and he's gone now. So it wouldn't surprise me if the Rams went and signed a veteran or traded for a veteran to come in and fill that role, but I wouldn't see it as a threat to Henderson in any way. He just needs to absorb Akers' touches, not Malcolm Brown's snaps. I also don't think any incoming veteran would really be a fantasy asset that I'd be interested in. So with Cam Akers being ruled out for the whole season, Henderson has a really good chance to break out in his 3rd year. He's kind of flown under the radar in his first 2 years, and I'm sure a lot of fantasy managers are not going to be excited about picking him up as a starter on their squad. But considering his ADP as of me recording this right now in early August, I really think this guy could end up being one of the biggest values in the draft this year. Right now, Henderson's ADP is around the late 4th round, early 5th round, depending on which platform you're using and how many teams are in your league. But generally speaking, he's going around pick 50. This puts him around running back 20, going near guys like Miles Sanders, Josh Jacobs, Travis Etienne, those kind of guys. He's also in that window where some teams in your league are going to go for a quarterback after that Mahomes tier, maybe like a Josh Allen or a Kyler Murray or a Lamar. Obviously in 2 quarterback leagues or superflex leagues, that's going to change things a bit, but it's safe to say that in a 1 quarterback league, he's going to be going in the late 4th round. He may fall into the 5th round. To me, that's a great value, especially considering that Akers was pushing up against that top tier of running backs, and some experts even are liking him as a late 1st rounder. And that was before knowing for sure that he would be dominating the workload in the offense. Now there's a much better chance that someone actually will be dominating the workload, considering the Rams' depth chart. So the fact that Henderson is going so late that you could actually get him as your running back 3, I just feel like that's huge upside with not a ton of risk attached. To summarize, I think Henderson's game film passes the eye test. He has a really well-rounded skill set and is pretty good at everything, even if he doesn't have that one elite skill that jumps out when you watch him. His team situation is also great, and there's been basically no changes from 2020 coming into this season. Sean McVay and the Rams offensive coordinator from 2020 are both still there. 4 out of the 5 starters on the offensive line are coming back. An offensive line, by the way, which is ranked as the 3rd best in the league according to Pro Football Focus. Last year, that running game put up top 10 numbers in terms of rushing attempts, rushing yards, and rushing touchdowns, and it should be more of the same in 2021. The main question is how much trust McVay will put in Henderson. But if things do work out for him, Henderson is going to be a league winner this season. Alright guys, that's all I have for this video. If you guys would like, in the description I've linked a video on my channel where I posted the entirety of Darrell Henderson's 2020, every single play, every single carry, every single catch, target, every play, even if it was called back by penalty. It's all in there. It's all in one video in the description. Check it out, and you guys can see for yourself and make your own decisions. That's it for this video. I'll see you guys in the next one.